Hey there, this is Jexy with the Systems Alliance, and in this video, we're going to go ahead and check out this weekend's box office report, where Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse finished #1 domestic, and Aquaman finished #1 globally while breaking an Amazon Prime record. Finishing #1 at the domestic box office this weekend was Sony and Marvel's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse with $35.4 million. Spider-Man also brought in $21 million from 44 overseas markets, led by $3.3 million with South Korea, $2.9 million from the UK, $2.3 million from Russia, and $2.3 million from Australia. It's opening in 11 more markets next week, including China and Spain. So obviously China's going to be the big one here. Spider-Man is huge in China. That's part of the reason why this most recent Spider-Man movie, Homecoming, made so much money. China was big for it. But with a $90 million budget, I think that this movie is actually grossing a little under what many expected or hoped it would. So it'll be interesting to see how these other markets, including China, which is a big one, play out. Warner Brothers' The Mule finished second in its opening weekend, grossing $17.2 million. That was followed up by The Grinch, dropping just 23% in its sixth week, grossing $11.5 million. So that movie just keeps chugging along, and no surprise, it is the season. Dropping 41% in its fourth week, Ralph Breaks the Internet finished with $9.5 million, and this movie cost $175 million to make, and worldwide sits at $285 million. So while there are still a lot of markets that this movie has yet to open up in, it's definitely far less than Wreck-It Ralph, the original. So I am a little worried that this one's not even going to come close, but we'll just have to wait and see. Rounding out the top five was Universal's Mortal Engines, coming in at $7.5 million, and that's its opening weekend. It did open up with $34.8 million overseas, so while its total sits at over $42 million, it's not looking good for this movie. It cost over $100 million to make. So the fact that it's only at $42 million now and opened with $7.5 million, this movie's looking like a definite flop. And every single review I've seen of it, I have not seen it myself. I'm not sure that I will. Maybe I will, but who knows? But looking at other reviewers and taking a look at their Rotten Tomatoes score, this seems to be one of everyone's least favorite movies of the entire year. That's how bad this movie is. It seems to hook people in the beginning and completely lose them the rest of the movie. I know they've been selling it on, oh, Peter Jackson produced it. Well, Peter Jackson didn't direct it, and this movie stinks. So it sucks. Obviously a much better book series, but it's just not carrying over to film. And with that, I expect this movie to lose money. Of an interesting note, Once Upon a Deadpool, which is the PG-13 version of Deadpool 2, that brought in an additional $2.6 million and $1 million from overseas. Now this box office will actually be added into the final tally for Deadpool 2. So even though it's the PG-13 version and there is different shots in it, it's still being considered the same movie for box office purposes. And keep in mind too, although they did not make that clear at all in the trailer, which I think really hurt them, they went for a straight comedy, this is all going, from what I understand, to children's cancer research. So obviously Deadpool in the movie, he has cancer. All the proceeds from this Christmas release, Once Upon a Deadpool, is being donated to children's cancer research. So that's awesome. I encourage you to go see this movie. You get some entertainment out of it, get to see some of the great things from Deadpool 2, get to see some new stuff, even though it's a PG-13 version, and then go ahead and know that you're donating to charity for kids' cancer. So hard to beat that. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, Aquaman finished #1 globally again, but what I really want to touch on is what they did domestic. And obviously you're thinking, okay, well, the movie doesn't open until next week, but remember, exclusive for Amazon Prime members, you could see Aquaman. It was open in about 1,100 theaters across the nation, so not its full opening, which is going to be over 4,000, but 1,100 theaters just this past weekend, you could go see Aquaman at one showtime at 7 p.m. And that one showtime in limited theaters brought in $2.9 million. So overall, with limited theaters for Aquaman and just one showing for those theaters on just one day, $2.9 million would have actually had it finish 10th this weekend. So there does seem to be lots of demand for Aquaman. It's setting records for Atom tickets to set the record for Amazon Prime, besting the previous $1.8 million for Jumanji. So things are definitely looking really good for Aquaman. The demand seems to be there, the reviews seem to be mostly positive, and at worst, the movie still seems to be a lot of fun, according to reviewers. So I expect Aquaman to beat out both Bumblebee, the new Transformers movie that's coming out, and Mary Poppins for the 3-day and the 5-day weekend that's coming up. But since Aquaman did finish #1 globally, let's go ahead and talk about that. Opening in an additional 42 markets, Aquaman brought in over $126 million. Aquaman's global total now stands at over $264 million once you include the $261 million plus that it's gotten from overseas and the $2.9 million it got on Saturday from the one showing with Amazon Prime. It brought in over $54 million in its second weekend in China alone, and now China stands at $189 million for Aquaman. So this is definitely heading towards that mid to high $200 million ratio for just China alone, which is going to be huge for this movie for its overall global box office. It also opened in Mexico with $7.9 million, Brazil with $7.7 million, Russia with $7.4 million, and the UK with $6.5 million. So big openings all around. Aquaman is doing really well overseas. And to go along with its domestic release next weekend, Aquaman also opens up in additional markets overseas, and those include France, South Korea, Germany, and Spain. So I expect this movie to do really well. It's definitely on pace overseas to top all of the DC Universe movies that are currently out. Whether or not it can best them domestic, that's a different thing. It would have a lot of competition to beat Wonder Woman, but I mean, with the overseas totals, Batman vs Superman beat Wonder Woman just because it had a much better overseas total. So it is possible that Aquaman can become the new #1 movie for the DC film universe. So things are definitely looking up for that. As I said previously, this upcoming weekend is a bunch of heavy hitters. We're looking at not only Aquaman, but also Transformers Bumblebee, and then Mary Poppins. So that's 3 huge movies that, if they were released at any other weekend, could all finish #1 in their own right. But this time I'm thinking Aquaman #1, then Bumblebee, then Mary Poppins. I could be wrong. Let me know your thoughts about what you expect from this upcoming weekend and what your thoughts are on this weekend with Spider-Man finishing #1 and Aquaman #1 overall. Let me know down in the comment section below. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, hit me up on Twitter, and we'll catch you later.